Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Cliff, thank you very much. You made at least a couple of points in your gracious introduction, for which I thank you, that I will reiterate. I also want to thank Michelle and your fellow board members and the whole team at NJBIA, and I'm incredibly honored to be here. Hi, Kathy. How are you? Long time. I'm incredibly honored to be with you this morning. In a few minutes after I make some remarks, I have the great honor of accepting an award posthumously on Sheila Oliver's behalf, and I want to give Renee and Charles Jr. a shout out who are with us. Joyce is here, dear friend. Tammy and I spent the afternoon before Thanksgiving last week with Renee, Charles, their parents, and Sheila's mom, who is 96 years old, and I think in remarkably good shape, particularly the tragedy that befell her in August. We actually went to visit her at her home in East Orange to present her the flag that flew over the State House at half-mast for the month of mourning for Sheila, and God bless her and God rest her soul. It also so happens that Candy Strait was a very good friend. We spent, among other memories, a magical day at Monmouth Racetrack with Candy and her mom and Joe and Susan Kurillis about 15 years ago, and I bet a whole combination of things and thought I had lost the bet. Candy picked it up off the table and realized that I misplaced the bet and I actually won money. So that's one of many, many memories. But back to, again, and to all the other awardees and honorees today, I can congratulate you to the elected officials here. I likewise salute you. Back to Sheila for a moment. So we started this journey almost 6 years ago. And we talked, as Cliff has said, about the stronger, fairer, hey Tom, Mike, stronger, fairer New Jersey, that we needed to grow. We had sort of been stuck in a static reality that the box was only so big, and if I did well, it was at your expense. So we had not the level of growth we needed. We had huge inequities, and we had become, I would argue, fiscally irresponsible. So those are the sort of three legs of the stool that we set out to tackle, as I said, almost 6 years ago. And we're on a journey. I'm proud of the progress we've made, but I said this in Atlantic City at the League a couple of weeks ago. I don't want you to think that I'm going to tear my rotator cuff patting myself on the back on all the progress we've made. We have a ways still to travel, for sure, but it's also equally accurate to say that we have made a significant amount of progress. I also mentioned this in Atlantic City at the League. Sheila and I from day one, and now me and Tahisha and the rest of the team. Wes Matthews is here from Choose New Jersey. I'm not sure Tim Sullivan is here from the Economic Development Authority. Eric Brophy and my team is the deputy chief in charge of oversees our economic affairs. Sheila and I were cold-blooded from day one, and I say this as a recovering banker, about what you can control and what you really can't control. And that's in market parlance, systematic risk and unsystematic risk. Systematic risk is stuff like the war in Ukraine, the brutal war in the Middle East. It's what Jerome Powell and the Fed are going to do about inflation, supply chain issues. Can you do stuff at the margin on those? As Cliff mentioned, I was an ambassador, so I've got some credibility on the foreign policy. Yes, but I'm not the president, I'm not the national security advisor, secretary of state, or anybody else whose full-time job it is. So while you have to acknowledge that reality, spending a lot of time on it is usually a waste of time. But what we've been obsessed with from day one is the unsystematic risk, which is the risk specifically associated with New Jersey and our lot in life and our endeavors. And so that is one that we manage obsessively, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. While acknowledging over here, by the way, doesn't feel terribly good. Brett Stevens has a great rant in the New York Times this morning in his back and forth with Gail Collins, which I find to be a really entertaining and informative weekly every Tuesday. But he goes through a laundry list of a lot of malaise out there right now. The percentage of parents who are helping out their kids who are between the ages of 22 and 40 is at an all-time high. Grocery prices, gasoline prices, rent, homeowner, restaurant prices. So to ignore that pain would be a huge mistake, but also to accept that there's only so much about some of that that you actually can control, and be clear-eyed about that. What that gets us to is a relative comparison, less informative, where are we today versus that day in January of 2018, almost 6 years ago, when we put our hands on the Bible. That is somewhat informative. You look at that to say, listen, have you made progress relative to the hand that you were dealt on day one? The more relative comparison is to other American states, particularly states that look like us. How are we doing on that front? And that, to me, is a whole lot more important. And that comparison is both for chief executives and businesses like many of you in this room, but it's also important for families, heads of household. Where are you going to raise your family? Where are you going to plant your flag? And so we collect 15 or 20, Wes and I and others were just in Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan, and I may come back to that in a few minutes. And we put together a scorecard, basically New Jersey, all the list of attributes against another 20-ish states. And we do quite well. We do quite well on things like public education, where we're number one in the country, quality of health care, all sorts of metrics, again, things that are important that we hear in our deliberations with in both boardrooms and in living rooms. And Jersey's doing well on that front. We need to, we want to, we must, and we will do better. But particularly against the states that we're up against, we're doing pretty well, and I knock on wood as I say that. It leads me to also acknowledge that a lot of the policies that we stand for, that we pursue, that we espouse, are balancing acts. And I'll give you a couple of examples of that. So on the one hand, you want small businesses to flourish, and you want business growth for sure. And on the other hand, the fairer side of that is you want to stand up on behalf of workers and protect their rights, whether it's wages, benefits, whatever else might enter into their calculation or equation in terms of whether or not they're being treated fairly. So that's a balance. You want to get that right. And some folks way back when we first got here said that balance was not possible. For instance, you couldn't raise minimum wage and allow your small businesses to flourish, particularly the mom and pops, the micro small businesses, employees of, say, 5 or fewer. Well, so far, so good on that front. We've been able to put those protections in place. And since we've been in office, there are 60,000 more small businesses than there were in January of 18. That is now means that we are at an all-time record high. Another balance, affordability, please God, yes, versus on the other side of it, can you fund the stuff that makes New Jersey what it is? I've said to many of you that every state has a bumper sticker. Ours is the #1 state in America to raise a family. So much of what we do feeds into that bumper sticker. So how do you get that right? How do you get the affordability side of this thing in the right place? We've had 20 tax cuts for middle-class families and seniors. I want to do more, but at the same time not imperil #1 public education system in America, our ability to make our pension payments, reduce indebtedness, et cetera. And then the third balance that runs through a lot of the policies and deliberations we have is cutting red tape on the one hand and protecting our state and communities on the other. And that was not easy. And when you're the most densely populated state in America, just to pick the environment as one dimension, you got to make sure getting a gentleman's C, if that's the hand you've been dealt, is not acceptable. That's much more of a pass-fail reality. But can we both achieve that and chop through red tape? We've made some progress. Chuck Richmond is our red tape czar, regulatory czar, and he's the best in the business. We've made decent progress. We got to make more at both the state, county, and local levels, but at the same time, do it in a way that does not imperil our communities, our counties, and our state. And I used environment as one dimension, but there are many dimensions that go into that. We have more people coming in than going out, so what are we doing about housing? Affordable housing in particular, workforce housing. What about rental costs? What about the price of a home? Notwithstanding interest rates being as high as they are today and mortgage rates being at 2-decade highs, the median price of a single-family home in New Jersey keeps going up, not down. It's now in the sort of $525,000, $530,000 range. When Sheila and I first got into office, it was $400,000. To give you a sense of the supply-demand imbalance that we have. What are we going to do about that? So that's another balance that we have to get right. Partly at Michelle's urging, and partly of our own, on our own side, I wanted to make a couple of somewhat unrelated, just to make sure you know where I stand in a couple of the programs we have in place. First one, since the beginning of COVID, we're number 3 in American states with the amount of money we put on the street for small businesses, only behind California and New York, and they're a lot bigger than we are. We put out somewhere between $800 and $900 million on the street for small businesses, and that's something that we're proud of. Cliff mentioned this. That includes the $50 million manufacturing voucher program, which was a wildly successful program, which I'd love to see us back the truck up, budget conditions permitting, and do even more on. Michelle would not ever invite me back again if I didn't say I'm still supporting the sunsetting of the corporate business tax on December 31st. And I even got a gentleman up back there to stand up, so that's a rare reaction. It's not, on the one hand, a deal's a deal. So we said this was a bridge till we get to a better place, and we meant it. On the other hand, it does exacerbate what is a structural deficit that we're running at the moment, and we have to be clear-eyed about that as well. And unlike Washington, we can't run structural deficits indefinitely. We have to balance the books every June 30th. Now, can you do it for a temporary period of time? You can, and that's why, among other reasons, we built the surplus up to a budget that I signed of $8.2 billion, which is not just an all-time record, it dwarfs any other record in terms of the size of our surplus. But part of that is to say, okay, I know for a period of time things may be soft, and that's my house view right now, that in the next 6 to 18 months, I feel like there's going to be a softness. You can get through that for a period of time, but you can't do what they do in Washington. I don't know if anybody knows this, the last structurally balanced budget in Washington was the mid-90s. So they've been running, if you're wondering why the national debt's going up, you're putting a deficit in every year for going on 30 years now. That we can't do that constitutionally in New Jersey. It also would be irresponsible in terms of fiscal management. Another area that I know is important to NJBIA and to all of you is workforce development. I'm proud of the $50 million that we've put into that, and we're going to continue to focus laser-like on that. The workforce development, the community colleges, the vocational programs are all becoming more important as opposed to less important. We know they're the pipeline in so many respects that feed your businesses. We want to continue to fund those programs, and we do some of that on our own, some of that with the likes of you, and some of that with the building trades, who do a great job at apprenticeship and workforce development programs. And one last specific one I want to hit before I wrap up with some sort of macro comments is childcare, and investing in childcare is a hugely important reality for you and for us. The EDA, by example, has a program right now, $100 million just to go in to freshen up, renovate, repair child care centers, never mind all the help that we're giving both the centers on the one hand, as well as moms and dads on the other hand, to make that more as affordable as possible. And this is, I don't have to tell you this is incredibly important to workforce strength, and especially to moms who are out there. And so we're going to continue to prioritize that. I mentioned that my house view, I'll go back to a couple of macro comments before we close, if that's okay. My house view is softness right now. You wouldn't know it from Black Friday, so I may be wrong. People are clearly consuming. And I'm told yesterday was another record internet purchase day, and that's nationally. I don't have the data for Jersey, but almost certainly, having been at the Jets game beside American Dream on Friday, on Black Friday, I'm highly confident the retailers had a good Friday in Jersey. So softness in the medium term, and there's a gap. There's a lead lag gap, and there's a macro man on the street gap. And we've seen that in economic cycles, good and bad, forever and for always. So at one level, inflation at the macro level is coming down. All the data says that. There's discussion in the press this morning that the Fed may even begin to cut rates as early as May of 2024. I remember being on Wall Street as a summer associate in August of 1982, dating myself, and the market rallied, and it was the biggest rally ever at that point. I think it went up 35 points, to give you an idea how much the Dow has grown over those ensuing 41 years. And the economic data didn't support any optimism at all, and yet the market began, the bull market began in August of 82, and it went on for many, many years. Well, that's the other side of the lead lag. You couldn't see it at that point, but markets anticipate good or bad depending on which direction you're going, and there's a gap as well. So that's a temporal gap, and there's a gap between macro and what the man on the street's feeling. That rant that Brett Stevens so eloquently wrote this morning is what people are perceiving. That's what their reality is right now. And so that I'm pretty confident we're going to see that reality flip, and it'll be a positive reality, but it won't be tomorrow. My gut tells me we're in a 6 to 18 month softness or sideways period of time. But in the medium to long term, I am a huge, huge bull on New Jersey. We are doing, and that's not, again, we're not patting ourselves on the back, but we are really, really well set up for the medium to long term. I mentioned that Wes and I and others were in Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan a few weeks ago. We sell really well internationally. And that's, I say that for two reasons. One is the obvious one. We have a lot of multinational companies that are headquartered here or have big presence here, and that's a good thing, and we want more of that and not less. But it also is a nice opportunity to get your nose back from being pressed against the glass. When you fly 7,000, 8,000 miles away, and in my case, going back to countries that I used to go to all the time, but I had not been there in 20 years, and you then pitch Jersey, it's a really good opportunity to sort of have a clean, fresh sense of how that pitch feels. As I mentioned, we had that score sheet out, which puts Jersey into a really, really good light. And we start, when anyone says to me, whether they're in Japan, Korea, Taiwan, North Carolina, Bergen County, Chicago, Illinois, quick, what words should I associate with Jersey? The first two out of our mouths are talent and location. And whether you're a Democrat or a Republican really doesn't matter if you look at the history of our state. If you fed those two engines and you were responsible about your fiscal house, invariably good things happened. And that's what that's a different way of saying that bumper sticker of #1 state in America to raise a family. You could also say Jersey, talent and location. And again, that sells well anywhere, but it's nice making that pitch when you are far from home and folks have sort of a blank sheet in terms of their impression of New Jersey. I'd also leave you with this, bless you, we don't miss a thing up here, by the way. Look for us to continue to feed the industries that have been naturally ours, as well as find ways to place sensible bets on industries that are either new, period, or new to New Jersey. So in that first category, bio, pharma, life sciences, tech telecom, fintech. Those are industries that we are a dominant player in. Look for us to continue to find ways to make that case even more compelling than it is today. And on the list over here, on the new stuff, we've had a bump in the road with offshore wind, but that's going to be, when we look back, when the history of Jersey is written, it's going to be a big industry, a big union-based industry. It'll be a game changer in our environment. Sports betting, not just the wagers, but the guts of the business, the jobs. It's a first cousin of fintech. Film, television, digital has become a big business. And while Netflix gets a lot of the headlines, and that's great, and they're coming into Monmouth County in a big way, that's also a huge mom and pop job spinner, small business creator, big union industry as well. We're, I think, the quintessential union state. And I'll give you one that I'm not making news on today, but I hope to within the next couple of weeks: generative artificial intelligence. We've been probing that industry for probably years at this point, but intensely over this past year. Its hub is in the Bay Area. We went out there and spent a lot of time with folks out there on Zooms, physically with them. It's a big higher ed component. And one of the things we've learned, and this has been validated by experts in that industry, this is all about talent, number one. And number two, they're in the Bay Area only for that reason. They're not there because they've got some bias toward being there. They're there because that's where the bodies are. John Dillinger, why do you rob banks? That's where the money is. Why are they in the Bay Area? That's where the talent is. And so Wes and Tim Sullivan and Eric Brophy and I and others have been working on what's a smart, headline-grabbing bet we can make that would accelerate basically as a magnet for artificial intelligence talent. And we should rightfully be built for this. I'm gonna die trying to make cars and trucks in New Jersey again, but I fear I'll be dying before that happens. Artificial intelligence is a whole different ballgame. It lines up with exactly who we are as a state. So you've probably seen in New Brunswick, we're making a big bet right in the middle of that crater in the middle of town, the Helix, which will be a life sciences bet. We're making a big bet in Liberty State Liberty Science Center with SciTech City. Look for a fintech bet that we'll make in terms of an incubator or innovation hub, and hold the thought as it relates to artificial intelligence. And that, if we can pull this off, and again, the next couple of weeks is an announcement, it will be years to pull it together, which all of these things take. It will be, I believe, a game changer. I'm incredibly honored to be here this morning. Thank you for being so good a listening audience. I wish you nothing but the very best for the holidays and into next year, and we are here for you. Thank you.